Honorable members, the House is now in session. Guide, we beseech thee, Almighty God, that members of this honorable House shall deliberate with honor for the good and the glory of this country and its people. Honorable members, may you join me as we begin with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Members, you may be seated. An announcement from the Speaker. This evening, it is a continuation of deliberations that started on Friday, the 7th of March, when the Honorable Member for St. Patrick's East presented a bill to this House commonly known as the budget. We are going to hear closing arguments from the Honorable Member who has been a champion in this House, has been sitting in this Honorable House for 40 years plus, and has represented the people of Northwest St. John. He has been the Prime Minister of this country for 22 years. It's a man that we must hail as a hero. So I now give way to the Honorable Member as he does his deliberation on the motion. Speaker would also like to announce that we need to have some order, but in this House, you can, if you wish, give claps and, of course, make some noise for your representative.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, in most of the period of my presentation this evening, I'll be addressing you as brothers and sisters. Well, I know the Speaker would allow me to do so, because this is what you call the People's Parliament. Let me first recognize my distinguished colleague members of Parliament, in particular the political leader of the New National Party. Honorable Edmund Pierre, Honorable Clarence Modeste Coyne, and Honorable Kate Lewis. And let me recognize all of you who have made this very special opportunity to come here this evening and for us to present, to hear me speaking on what is considered to be a budget. In fact, in fact, people have another name for it, but I wouldn't say I start with body. But let me indeed recognize all the people of Northwest St. George's who have given me 40 years of solid representation. And because some of them do not know the history of Northwest, they say they came here to bury me. But some of them just come, they're hot-headed, so to speak. So I hope they would listen tonight and learn. But let me say, the political leader gave an excellent response. To that so-called budget. So tonight, I will do my share. Sisters and brothers, having been around that length of time, it frightens me and worries me with the extent to which the parliament of the country is being destroyed. Your present Prime Minister seems to believe that he is baby Jesus, and therefore he doesn't have to account and obey no rules at all. But sisters and brothers, the parliament of the country must be respected. It must be respected. I have sent in over 25 questions and more that they have refused to bring on the other paper, and no matter what you do, they have refused to answer and be responsible to the people of this country because they're too big. Sisters and brothers, I have never seen that in the parliament. Starting from Prime Minister Hubert Blaise to now, I have never seen anything like this in the parliament of the country. And I am saying your present Prime Minister is the main person responsible for desecrating the parliament of the country and by implication, interfering with the governance of this country. And I think we have to zero in on that. Zero in on who is responsible for where we are today and where we'll continue to be as long as this government continues in office. My friends, to some extent, I think we see in a comparison of what we see in Grenada today with what we see in the United States at this time. The feeling is that one can tell any amount of lies you want. Just lie, 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 and keep repeating it and people are going to believe it. When you have no respect for truth, when you have no respect for the system that you pledge to uphold, your governance system is in serious trouble. And we, the people, must understand. The only person or group to change that is we, the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Peter Martinique. Before I bring in my presentation on the budget specifically, I read you 4 quotes or statements made by your Prime Minister which is frightening. Well, it is the Prime Minister of the country, and we are members of the country. Let me read the 4 quotes before I begin my presentation. The Prime Minister stood up in the Parliament, the first Parliament we had, almost 3 years ago. And you know what he said? Nothing happened in Grenada since 1983. Did you hear that? Well, friends, it's not just that he lies. The man was, I don't know if he was creeping at the time in 1984. So I don't know if somebody tell him something or he read something in a book. But nothing happened in Grenada, yet he's speaking and using the telephone that the New National Party, led by Gregory Bowen and his team, brought into this country and to the entire OECS. Listen to another statement. In answering a question about criticism launched against his government for behavior patterns of lack of accountability in government, the Prime Minister would say, some of them running their mouth, and they have committed so much crime, they should be dead. That is the Prime Minister of your country. He did not say they should go to jail. They should be dead. This is a serious statement. Listen to another quote in Bouchejou. The reason that some of our supporters are not getting help is because we have not been able to identify who they are from the NDC, from the NNP supporters. In other words, the man is Prime Minister of NDC. He's not Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The last one, there's several, but the last one I'll give you, it tells you something. In answering a question of to account for the $10,000 that we get every month to help people in the constituency, he said he's not going to account to the Parliament for the money spent. In other words, it is his $10,000 and he could spend it how he wants. But the message in that is serious, because if you, the Prime Minister, is making such a statement, you could imagine what your members will do. So he's sending a serious message of lack of accountability. I wonder how Brother Timman Thomas could sit there after he talked so much about accountability, transparency, and good governance, and his Prime Minister would make a statement like this. I wait to hear from others, people like him. But friends, as I begin my presentation, I wish to place on record, and that's the seriousness of the thing, what I'm saying here tonight, especially that first statement. I wish to place on record that this budget that came to Parliament, technically, is not a legal presentation. I'll tell you why. The expenditure figures approved by the majority of members of the Finance Committee, the Standing Committee on Finance, of February 19th, 2025, differ from what came to the Honorable House on Parliament Day. Just listen carefully, because it's a serious, serious breach of the fundamental laws of the land. The inconsistency appears in the recurrent expenditure in at least 10 votes of the Parliament. In other words, the Standing Committee on Finance is supposed to meet before the budget, and they approve every expenditure item. And any change what is decided at that committee meeting on February 19th must be what must come before the House. It says so in the standing orders of the House. That must come. But after we met, there were changes in 10 votes. And listen what it says, what the law says. It would be irresponsible of me, therefore, if I fail to record that this contravenes Section 68, subsection 6 of the Standing Orders, which states, each item of expenditure that has been approved by the Finance Committee shall be specifically submitted for approval to the House. No item of expenditure which has not been approved by the committee shall be submitted, shall, not may, shall be submitted for consideration by the House unless a motion to that effect is made otherwise, unquote. In other words, if there was a change, they had to have a separate session, a motion before the House to make the changes officially before it reaches the Parliament for discussion of the estimate of revenue and expenditure. Accordingly, motion should have been made to that effect. While the conduct of business in the House has been desecrated, and I've said that before, and woefully below acceptable standards, I feel duty-bound to ensure that the people must know what their government is doing that's affecting their own lives and doing what they wish and not obeying their own rules that we agree to obey. So we are discussing the 2025 budget in the shadow, and that's something we have to watch. We listen to news regionally and internationally. In the shadow of continuous signs on the horizon. The IMF most recent forecast for the 2025 says the world economic outlook warns that global growth is weakening over time. In other words, expect there are going to be serious problems coming forward. And it's expected growth to be no more than 3.3%. Below its increased average of 3.7%. In other words, this is what they're projecting. Moreover, the U.S. intensification of the protectionist policies. Now you're hearing about tariff being placed around the global, affecting countries. These costs will reach us if it goes forward. It has the potential to increase trade tensions, lower investment, reduce market efficiencies, distort trade flows, and therefore more economic growth prospects would be stifled. And the cost of living, therefore, will continue to increase, and you see how it is increasing already. The emerging markets and developing economies of which Grenada is a part. Coupled with these challenges, Grenada was recently impacted, as you know, by Hurricane Beryl, which affected 16.5% growth of GDP. Notwithstanding this, sisters and brothers, the team that I had the pleasure of leading over the years, in collaboration with social partners which we developed, prepared our country for such a situation like this, that if there is a problem, we have things in place to protect our country. We will recall, sisters and brothers, that the new National Party's administration, together with our social partners, set in motion a group of measures, legal and otherwise, that place Grenada on a fiscally sustainable trajectory, with adequate safeguards to cushion man-made and natural disasters. Let me name some of them. You won't remember them, but I stated here because it's going for the record for future. We brought in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2015. Well, you know what responsibility is. You have to be responsible fiscally. You can't earn $10 and spend $20. The Public Debt Management Act, in other words, to keep the debt of the country to protect our future generations, because they have to pay it. That's another one. The Public Finance Management Act of 2015, the third one. The Public Procurement Act of 2014. The Comprehensive Catastrophic Insurance Coverage. That is what led to receipt of funds. The contingency funds and other fiscal buffers were all geared at building fiscal resilience for the state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. In other words, sisters and brothers, we didn't just talk. We took act to Parliament. Not just by talk, by putting it in law. In other words, forcing ourselves to behave. We didn't have to do that. We can continue business as usual, spend as we want, do what we want. But we were so concerned about the future of this country that we took steps to control how we operate. And we did it by law. So we had to live with it, so to speak. Brothers and sisters, it appears that there is an effort. And listen to that one. You heard them say in Parliament how we had a contingency fund, but we never put money in the contingency fund. I'm sure you heard that? But you know, I used to be a teacher, so if I had a student say that in class, I'd throw him out of the class. Because he obviously can't learn. Sisters and brothers, what they don't know, every single monies that come into government, I don't care what name you call it, what budgetary item or name you give to it, it all goes in something called a consolidated fund. So, it means that the contingency fund is part of the consolidated fund. The consolidated fund is the big item. And every other one that have monies in it is called a subset, part of the consolidated fund. I hope they understand this. My friends, but they're out there saying that we were irresponsible, talking about a fund and we never put money in a fund to mislead you. But you know something? They're saying these things because they believe Grenadians are stupid. I believe some of them are ignorant enough not to understand what it's all about. But there's a level of mischief that I see in this. That they believe they could cover your eyes and your ears by tie up your head, my sister said. By making these statements to fool you. But one thing you know about the New National Party, those team of members here and others who are sitting here today, we never deliberately went out and attempted to fool the Grenadian people. We were not perfect, but we made mistakes. And we were never afraid to admit those mistakes because we are just human. So friends, IMF cut Article 4 consultation of June 28, 2023, assessing the budgetary policies of 2022, as presented by the Minister of Finance then, Gregory Bowen. It concluded that this government inherited a debt to the GDP ratio of 63.7%. Remember, when we got into government, we met a debt to GDP ratio of over 110%. In other words, your debt was quite larger than all the money you earn in the country for a year. That's how bad the situation was. And it had a primary surplus of $84.5 million. A primary surplus. That means after we take care of all our expenditure, the revenue we earn, well, we had a surplus of $84.5 million. That was NNP. And that means, remember, we came into government with no money in the treasury. And they themselves, they were selling assets every month, selling a building, selling land to pay salaries. But NNP created primary surpluses, as Gregory pointed out in his budget presentation, and our overall surplus of $30.8 million. And our growth rate, not 3.7, they're talking of 6.2%. Sisters and brothers, this was the government of the New National Party. And no one man was involved. The whole team of the New National Party deserve credit. And all the people of the country deserve credit because we had to get stakeholders. We brought together the business community, the trade union, the non-governmental community, and I wonder where some of them are now. The Conference of Churches and other church organizations. I can't hear no voices now. Everybody quiet. The worst is taking place in this country, and not a drum is heard. But the drum will come from the New National Party. We must never forget that it was a tremendous sacrifice of our people that enabled our country to build up the fiscal buffers for difficult times as this, as we face today, and according to the IMF, may no doubt face in the not too distant future. Sisters and brothers, the question is, where are we today? Instead of the government maintaining a strong fiscal policy and behaving themselves, they immediately gutted the fiscal resilient infrastructure that we had in place for the last 3 years, almost 3 years. While they're going on a spending spree, enjoying themselves, gala for show, gala for ministers and close associates, while the Grenadian people hunger, can't find jobs, and can't meet their basic needs. Sisters and brothers, in other words, this thing is about themselves. It's not about you. It's not about the people. It's about themselves. I recall, and sometimes I feel sorry, because as Prime Minister and Chairman of your cabinet then, I ask members to adhere to fundamental expenditure rules. Do not waste the taxpayers' money. I hardly travel unless an international organization or something was paying for tickets. And when I had to do some privately, I paid my own way. Ministers of government, and I feel sorry in a way, they could not travel on first class. They all traveled economy class. But every member of this government, you go on any plane, you see everyone in first class. Everybody. Tout moon. Only recently, Prime Minister Motley in Barbados just announced that in 7 years, our government spent $1.2 million on travels. This government has spent almost that in almost 3 years. If we think these guys care anything about anybody, joke we're making. And that's why they want to prevent people from speaking. That's why they're threatening people and threatening the poor people, even if they're on the road. You have to afraid to come to a meeting. But I tell you, sisters and brothers, there's a quote that says, cowards die many times before their death. So the most coward people are the ones now running government in this country. The fiscal responsibility rules, sisters and brothers, were adjusted to facilitate in many respects a top-heavy government. They came in and they made the rule in place, and what they did? We had the rule in place to keep government expenditure for just paying people. That is not that people. They're not talking about ordinary staff in government. That the big boys, the consultants, the big advisors. We had a rule: you can't go beyond 9% of the GDP. They went to Parliament even before they start government and change it to 13% to give them room to raise ministers' salary by 106% overnight. And not a word was heard from certain organizations in the country that used to talk. If NMP raised the salary by $5, man making noise. But overnight they gave themselves $6,000 each. Tax-free, not part of the lump sum that you can tax part of it. Tax-free. And not a drum was heard. We remain silent. They did more than that. There was also a reduction in the primary balance rule from 3.5%. In other words, we want to keep the primary balance high for future possibilities. For generations coming would meet a good thing. You remember when they came in, they said they meet a pregnant treasury? Well, I don't know much about pregnancy, so you all know a lot more about that. And they said they bring it down from 3.5% of GDP to 1.5 overnight before they had a chance to govern. In other words, the intention was clear from day one to enjoy themselves. Because sometimes, friends, when you're involved in something and you reach a stage where you got stuck, you make a decision to change so that you can give you the room to do well. They didn't wait to get stuck and to have a problem. The intention was already declared. Before they start to work, they raised the pay. And also, sisters and brothers, the primary surplus rule from 3.5%, primary balance, to 1.5%. So that will give them, because if they didn't do that, they'll be breaking the law. So they went to Parliament and make a change to allow them to do what they want. Friends, the primary balance rule was legislated to allow the country to reach 55% of debt to GDP. And this was seen as sustainable given the size of our economy. So in less than 7 years, the New National Party was able to reduce the debt to GDP ratio from 108% to 58% in 2019. Sister, we didn't do that and have people suffering. You. We had road work 4 times a year. And you all will know, that over 6,000 people, excuse me, over 6,000 people were walking on the roads. You wonder why? When NNP was in office, every shop you pass, crowded with people enjoying themselves. Because the poor people had money to spend. And it is said, anytime you walk into a country, you could know easily if the economy is doing well, if the country is doing well. When you drive through a village and you see the popular shops, and even not so popular shops, people are crowded, buying and having social interaction. Try now. Every place you pass, thing bad. You remember I did say in Parliament that I used to think when I was in the government, I used to be going to Victoria on a Friday and relax. And every time I reached the lands, I have to go all the Guava Street and come down through the back because I've fed for so. They always carnival in Guava every Friday evening. Now, when you're driving through Guava, anytime you want, they're making NDC put Guava to sleep. Friends, therefore, they did more. At the National Transformation Fund, which is the CBI fund we established, you recall when we initiated this citizenship by passport availability in the country, you remember the NDC was the biggest opponent of this? You remember they were saying that we're selling the birthright of Grenadians? Friends, well, I tell you something. We were very careful, the people we sold passport to. We gave the CBI recommendation for. So our numbers were relatively small in all the years we were there. NDC has sold more passport in 3 years than NNP sold in over 7 to 8 years. Several times more. I'm not talking about just amount. Several times more. And Mr. Accountability and others, not a word was heard. But let me make the main point. We said since we are supposed to manage the economy and grow the economy to create room for investment in the country and create jobs, we said the CBI resources, we should put aside 40% of that in the contingency fund that they talk about that we didn't put. You know what they did? As soon as they came in again, they did not wait. They reduced it to 10%. And since they're selling far more than we did, you could imagine the amount of money that is going in wasteful expenditure for their friends. My friends, we cannot take this thing lightly, because these guys are showing. In fact, the Prime Minister from day one is telling us how we intend to operate. He said he can't stay in Mount Royal, that's for kids. That place is not for people like him. So he goes to a place in Grand Anse, looking over the hills, costing you over $20,000 plus per month. Monies that could go to help the poor children of this country, to help the poor people of this country to survive. And then, no wonder he said he's not accounting for the $10,000 they have to give him. He has to get it, and he's not accounting. The parliament is supposed to be the highest body in the land. He said he's not accounting to the parliament. Well, I am accounting every single quarter. We find every bill, and we're setting up the parliament. And I've been in parliament for 40 years. I've been the prime minister for 23 years. So if anyone deserves a little recognition that you didn't have, if anyone deserves to get a little buy, it's me. All right? Don't you agree? But then would be, my view is that there is no buy for anyone as long as it's government funds, sisters and brothers. Some brothers, over the medium term, our GDP growth is projected to slow due to the following: the economic downturn in tourism sector, renewed increases in food and fuel prices. The same IMF report also warns that the primary deficit in 2025 to 2026 will average 3% of GDP. The warning is now projected to be a reality as presented in the 2025 budget. Having inherited a healthy, as they said, pregnant treasury on assuming the reins of power in 2022. In less than 3 years later, this government is presenting a budget with a serious deficit. And you know they're telling you, it's not a deficit, it's a surplus. So it's like when you go to school and they tell you subtract, you add. When they tell you add, you subtract. That is NDC mathematics. That is Dickens mathematics. A situation, sisters and brothers, where they are spending more than they're earning. Imagine. The government, listen to this, the government revenue for 2025 is $1.193 billion. $1.193 billion. That's the revenue. NNP revenue was nowhere close to that. Nowhere close to that. But listen to this one. In other words, the government is expected to generate all these monies I just mentioned, $1.193 billion, from local taxes, fees, charges, and passport sales in 2025. I don't believe our revenue went over $700 million. I can't recall the numbers right now, but it certainly didn't reach anywhere close to $1 billion. While the cost of running the government, excluding interest and public debt repayment, is $1.474 billion, it leaves a deficit of $281 million. But they say they do a surplus. So a negative turn into a positive. All of them need to go back to primary school. Without paying a cent on the debts owed, they didn't pay a debt yet. the government is short of approximately $281 million to pay salaries, wages, contractors, and the likes, and all the big advisors and so on. Sisters and brothers, according to the their own medium-term report, fiscal report, 2025 to 2027, as laid in the House, so we have the document. This represents a negative 5.1% of the gross domestic product, GDP, negative 5.1%. So, sisters and brothers, if we go further to include our debt payment of $567.8 million as part of the expenditure of government as budgeted in 2025, and add the grant support, the total expenditure would be $2.04 billion. You see where we're going? This results in a deficit of $776 million. Yet they say they presented a totally financed budget. It is not by guess that the Minister of Finance brought to the House a loan appropriation to borrow $825 million. And it is said in the report, in the speech, it is helped to fund the 2025 budget. So imagine you coming to me and tell you, I spend, in managing the business you gave me, I meet all expenditure and I totally finance the operation. But then you send a bill to me and tell me you went and you borrow a pile of money. So you're taking loans to meet your irresponsible spending, and you're telling me that it's financing the budget. First of all, in 2012, the NDC presented a budget, and they claimed they had to borrow $500 and some million to support finance. They're going to borrow that. My friends, nothing happened because where they expected to get that money, they did not get it. In other words, it's bad enough to borrow because they cannot get it from the IMF at very cheap rates. They cannot get it from the World Bank. So they have to go to commercial bank, and the commercial bank must see how you're going to repay it. So you see the problem that your country is facing with these guys. My friends, imagine a household having to take a loan from a bank to meet your cost of light, food, water, and basic needs for the functioning of that household. Not even the NDC government of old, led by Tillman Thomas, with Nazim Buck as Minister of Finance, on their worst day during their tenure of service, presided over a primary balance negative deficit of 5.1% of GDP. Not even them. And you know how much we criticize how they operated. But they were far better than what we see here today. Baby Jesus is giving us. My friends, sisters and brothers, history will note that this government is likely to accumulate approximately $1 billion in debt if they borrow the $825 million. This is frightening because you, your children, and your grandchildren would have to pay that back. My friends, this means, as I said before, the only people to correct this thing we're talking about that now running this country is the people. No one else can stop it. What is even worse, this government has collected more revenues, and particularly from the sale of passports. Sisters and brothers, when Beryl came, it was a few weeks after they came into government. Within 2 weeks of Beryl, they got $118 million. $118 million EC dollars. You know how? And you know they're bold-faced enough to say, is they responsible for it? And making statement in Parliament with me sitting there. Sister Emlyn sitting there. Sister Kate sitting there. Sister Clarisse watching us in our face and lying. Let me just give you a simple thing, little piece of math. They say they made close to $1 billion in selling passports, right? That's they said. They said that. So they said a lot. Let's suppose it's not $1 billion, but they say $700 million. They made $500 million from NNP in the Treasury, which means that included the contingency fund. They got $118 million in 2 weeks after burial. Just keep adding. That does not count the custom revenue, the inland revenue, and other activities of government and grant support that they have given. The question you have to ask, where all that money gone? Where all that money gone? You could hold it because this is not. I think it's Jimmy Cliff said that there are more questions than answers. It means, sisters and brothers, the nation is forced to fund the luxurious lifestyle of an elitist government. A government that has more advisors and consultants than they have permanent secretaries. A government that travels first class on private jets paid for by the people of Grenada, merely to attend parties and social functions, not to go and get help for you, you know. Sisters and brothers, every time we traveled, we gave a report of what we achieved and the expenditure we involved, especially if it was government funds directly. Nothing is heard from these guys, but they're enjoying themselves at your expense. Sisters and brothers, in addition, the government makes large transfers to entities that they have created to enrich their supporters and close associates of the government. A government that spent over $3 million on vehicles. You've seen them all over the place. A government that has, in my view, they have champagne taste, but Marby budget. Or Sweetwater budget. Never see that? Because when we have nothing to go by, we still just sweeten the water. Sure. My friends, a close look at the government expenditure, the excluding debt, it showed a budgetary increase of $281 million, $0.6 million, of which $204.6 million is spent on day-to-day operational or recurrent expenditure, with $77 million or 27% of this is associated to capital projects. In other words, in government, sisters and brothers, when you budget, if you're a serious government, you have to manage your affairs so that you spend less than what you earn, so you have savings, and you use that extra, together with any grant you get from a government or sales of passports, your 40% contingency, to invest in the capital budget. Because the capital budget is where the jobs are created, it's for activities in the country, sisters and brothers. But this is the complete reverse. Only 27% of the monies I just mentioned is spent on the capital program. So the emphasis is not about, have you seen any new project since the guys came into office? So it doesn't take a lot of, you don't have to be a scientist, a mathematician, or engineer to understand what I'm talking about here. Right? It's only Andy that might not understand what they're talking about. This means, sisters and brothers, that the government has increased the cost of running the bureaucracy of the public service by enormous amount. And therefore, it is going to do a tremendous negative for the entire country. Sisters and brothers, it is said all over the world. When I was in Washington, and that's not a boast, I hardly talk about this, but I used to consult for the World Bank and IMF on several institutions. I traveled in many African countries with them. And one thing they tell you, the advice you give to every government, don't spend more than you earn. And leave something for rainy days. And invest in the productive sector of the economy. In other words, in Grenada, as I would say later on, you must spend more on tourism because it brings in, the more people you get, brings in foreign exchange. Spend more on agriculture. Spend more on developing small business because it's creating jobs and opportunities in the country. But this government has now increased the ministries. There are 5 new ministries in the country since we came last government, sisters and brothers. So you know what you're paying for? A massive bureaucracy. People don't have to go through any system again, to get a job. You're just told to go to work. And the Public Service Commission is going to cover you. You just have to be known as a supporter. Sisters and brothers, so don't underestimate what the Prime Minister said in Busheshu, He said it, because he's silly enough not to understand that you should never have uttered such words. In effect, he say, we have to know who you are to get something. But no one knew the gentleman before. And we take the prime ministership and we give him. So he's enjoying himself, sisters and brothers. Sisters and brothers, there are several units they have created. Besides the consultants and foreign mission, now establishing mission in Saudi Arabia, you know the cost of that? We had difficulty even funding the office in London because it was costly, too costly. The pounds that you have to pay. And we live, the London rental in London is one of the most expensive places in the world. Millions being spent on entertainment. You know something called Nation Builders? They create that institution and spending millions of dollars on Nation Builders. The National Celebration Committee are given broad mouths, money for so millions of dollars, no account. I have written asking for account report on this when I was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. The opposition leader is now chairman. I hope she still leave me on the committee. Yeah. I beg him. Sisters and brothers, all of these areas are staffed with political operatives, not necessarily qualified, but they have one qualification, close to the National Democratic Congress. But they don't know Grenadians, When you hear a Grenadian want a job coming by you, Doc, you're the greatest man in the world. Sometimes when they leave me, you will feel like it was Jesus Christ. And then the next thing you hear, they go and vote for the National Democratic Congress. He doesn't know Grenadians. Time will tell. So the operational expenditures of these categories move from $175.1 million in 2024 to $353.1 million in 2025. More fun, fet, frolic for the big boys. These increases have done nothing to do with programs and projects that would benefit the people, but rather it is a place to enrich a few. The people of Grenada, for generations to come, will bear the burden of funding this elitist lifestyle of this government through borrowing. Sisters and brothers, while it is rather unfortunate that this government has seen it fit to embark on a spending spree for themselves, this is a painful reality for all people. Unfortunately, as long as they're there, we have to endure it. But it's up to us to decide when they will be there. Grenadians must hold this government accountable. The spending spree is not in the interest of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, but rather the taxpayers funding the lifestyle of these fellas. And while this is happening, the programs that are important to the country, youth development, helping the young people, because the votes they got from the young people was responsible for them being in government today. Yet, they cut the youth program by millions of dollars. Tourism has been cut by millions also. Agriculture has been cut. I'll explain later more in detail. Housing, key areas that you have to spend to ensure that you have quality social life in the country and the health care of the country. All of these areas, sisters and brothers, have been cut. In the area of youth development, prior to June 22 elections, the Prime Minister and this government promised all Imanis and contract workers employment within 12 months of coming into office. By December 5th, 2022, on the first fiscal budget delivery of this government, the Prime Minister and then the Minister of Finance started reimagining the Imani program. Budget 24, the remanaging continued and up to today. The transformation of the Imani program into permanent work is still a figment of the government's imagination. This election gimmick, in order to tell them what they want to hear, just get their votes. Responsible in budget cuts in all the key areas of government. In 2025, there is an $8.5 million cut in the Imani program. $8.5 million. And the young people voted for them. Not a new project or transitional arrangement for the permanency of these trainees as they promised. Nothing is in sight. Additionally, there's a $200,000 cut in the Empower program, specifically budgeted for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, in a time that Carriacou mash up. That is how these guys care about people. This government, in addition, has not conceptualized, developed, sought funding, or implemented a single new youth project. I think Sister Kate did elaborate on that, the budget. The budget caters for $2 million and $1 million respectively for Elevate Her, quote unquote, and the enterprise-based training program. These two programs are funded under the Grenada Education Enhancement Project, GIP. a product of the new National Party's government. Accordingly, sisters and brothers, a $3 million inclusion for an ongoing project that you inherited while butchering another $8.5 million is a clear deceit to the young people of the country. In other words, you put $3 million one place, but you take out $8.5 million another place. They call them smart men. Tourism. While the Prime Minister and this government run around entertaining billionaires at the expense of our people, tourism is one few sectors that grew in 2024. But listen to this. However, the expected capital spending in this sector in 2024 is over $6.7 million less than what was spent in 2025 than what was spent in 2024. So the budget is $6.7 million less for a major productive sector. You see the priority? Increases for so in traveling, increases in FET, increases in everything else for fun. But the areas that will create jobs, create economic activity, has been cut by enormous amount. You know, someone told me that the Prime Minister went on some kind of, to be an actor. But he's been acting in Grenada for a while, for 3 years. He's very good at acting. So maybe they recognize how good he's been acting in Grenada. They chose him to act. Spending the taxpayers' monies to appear on the Real Housewives listen where he went. The program is called The Real Housewives of Atlanta TV. Or you could repeat that? The Real Housewives of Atlanta TV. My Prime Minister went there. We are interested in knowing about the Real Housewives of Grenada. How they manage on a day-to-day basis. That's what we want to know. We want to know about the housewives in Grenada with the rising cost of living. Sisters and brothers, the families have been affected, but that is not the priority of this Prime Minister and this government. Enjoy themselves at all costs. Infrastructure development. You have seen the state of the roads in this country. It has never been so bad. I compared favorably when I came back in 1984, and really, it was real bad. When the member Soka Boka sang a tune, road in the hole is not hole in the road. My friends, listen to this. This government have saw it fit to cut the budget for asphalt works and road rehabilitation by $13 million. So they expect, with all the state of the roads, to spend $13 million less on just asphalt. It tells you where they're going. While the taxpayers fund the travel expenses of the Prime Minister and called Ministers of Works, the people are forced to traverse on roads that are so deplorable. But he's cutting the materials for fixing the roads by $13 million, just one item. It appears that this government is unaware of which aspects of the budget truly promote economic growth. That's a fact. If you look at the budget, you realize, at least most of them, I can't say everybody in the government is the same. Because maybe you have a couple of them that who may have understood, but they can't talk. It seems that they don't know what encourages economic growth to make people happy. So they believe they could go on social media and tell lies and curse people and say all kind of dirty things about people, and you will fall for that. But let them know, when these things work, you work when you're in opposition and somebody is in government. But when you're in government, the lies don't work unless we stop working and doing the work that we know we must do to stop this nonsense going on in this country. My friends, 3 years have passed, yet it seems the previous administration continues to live rent-free in the minds of the government's cabinet members, while the needs of the people are neither adequately considered nor addressed. Agriculture. The Caribbean Food and Security Livelihood Survey report of 2024 warns that food insecurity is on the increase. 43% of the people in the English-speaking Caribbean are faced with food insecurity. This is 78% higher than at the start of the pandemic in 2020. With the most vulnerable, particularly those with lower income and those with disability, chronic illnesses being the most affected. The looming crisis of food production specific to Grenada is evident in a notable decline in the agricultural sector. Accordingly to the government's medium-term economic and strategic report, listen to this, the government-owned report, it says nutmeg is down, maize is down, cocoa decline, banana production down, and other crops have been down by 18.1 and 4.8% respectively. Moreover, the Consumer Price Index, which is the thing they use to measure inflation in the country, showed an increase in the cost of agricultural products, including poultry, fish, and pork. Any government that has the people's interests, and most specifically the farmers of the country, at heart, would naturally develop capital programs, as I mentioned before, and policies that allow them to invest more in agriculture in 2025. On page 25 of the budget statement, this is somebody who is almost laughable. The Minister of Finance gave the impression in his budget statement that $36.9 million were invested in the ministry, Blue Economy and Marine Affairs, which now houses fisheries. However, I wish to refer the Minister to page 921 of the estimate, which says a mere $6 million, not $36 million, was budgeted for this ministry. In other words, you go out in Parliament and you utter a word, a number, and the document says something else. I already pointed out how the finance document, which is got to be the Bible for Parliament for the budget, was interfered with. My friends, therefore, the point we are making is simply this. Worthy of mention also are the cuts in support for poultry farmers. The support for soursop farmers. You know, soursop is almost a choice fruit now. It is identified as one that has great healing components. In fact, 3 years ago I was at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a professor that said to me, anytime you see a soursop and you could eat it, boil the leaf and take it, do that. Because they have tested it. MIT is one of the leading research institutions in the United States. And they tell you that it gives great healing. My friends, as I wind down, let me say this. It is well known in housing that Hurricane Beryl caused damage to the northern part of Grenada. The 2024 IMF Fund Article 4 consultation says that Carriacou and Petite Martinique specifically suffered an 80% loss in the housing stock. Accordingly, we can all agree that the need for affordable housing in Grenada, in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, has worsened and intensified since July 2024. It therefore baffles me that almost a year later, the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique are still operating under tents, tarpaulin, and makeshift shelters. With only 3 Build Back Better homes completed in 2024 and $141 million spent on burial. Tell me where $141 million could have been spent and only 3 known Build Back houses. So there's a lot of things that have to happen when government changes. The monies government claimed to have spent on burial is 3 times the national budget of the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, without 1 Build Back home available for Carriacou, in addition to what they mentioned. I was shocked. I went to Carriacou immediately after burial, and I could not believe the Hillsborough playing field. There are so many places in Carriacou to dump garbage and debris from the hurricane. But they commanded the main playing field in Carriacou and placed all the garbage and debris. I was sick because I remember how we spent a lot of resources building that playing field in Hillsborough. I remember how teams came from abroad and played there, because the quality of the wicket for cricket and football was well known. But these guys chose the garbage. You had so many places in Carriacou to dump. So while I was there, it was Sister Emlyn and I were the ones up there. A well-known supporter who works with the Ministry of Carriacou came over. Doc, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine, but I have a serious problem. Because, you know, as a former cricketer and somebody who loves sports and love the young people, I am quite concerned. He said, don't worry that, man, we go fix that up, man. Don't worry that. You see the mindset? So all the months, they now say they're cleaning up the playing field now. So that means no serious cricket or football can happen there now. This is the mindset of a childish, petty, dunce group of persons. My friends, the budget in Carriacou, it's our St. Patrick's, reflects that $26.8 million was spent in cost overrun of $17.3 million, and not a single house was delivered in St. Patrick's in 2024. They budget a pile of money, but no one in St. Patrick could tell you they see a house. I see one in Perseverance. One in Perseverance. Well, we know what's happening. And if you know the history of that section, that used to be a burial ground. So they put a house right there. So clearly, the intention of the government is to satisfy themselves, not to do what the people wish. Sisters and brothers, a comment I need to make about the housing program. These Chinese houses, remember, Elvin, Nimrod, and I and the delegation went to China, and we sought to have the Chinese to give us serious help. And we made a proposal for grant houses, not houses that have to be paid and get loan for. Grant houses for the poor people of the country. You know, people like me can't qualify. Many of us may not be able to qualify. So that was the condition. The Chinese agreed, and they gave us thousands of homes. So I am amazed the guys come into government. And most of these houses, from what I understand, we don't see the report, we're asking for the report. Most of them are given to people who can go to the bank and get a loan. while the poor people, the single mothers, the family who need the homes have difficulty. Sisters and brothers, as I move to conclude, because you notice my voice is going, healthcare. As I stand here tonight, last night, I had a difficult experience watching a very good friend of mine and close family, Brother Dennis Campbell. I saw him take his last breath. That was painful. And I'm not talking about the hospital response, I'm only making this point. So the hospital services are key. But it's not the building. You could build the best building. You could build the best building. If you don't have the equipment, the medication, the trained staff, and the way you treat them.
Mr. Speaker, I rise this evening in solidarity with a member for St. George Northwest not having had the opportunity to deliver his presentation of response to the 2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure a few days ago in the lower house of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I believe it is extremely obvious to you tonight that the burden that he carries for the people of this country, the pain that he feels for the people of this country and his constituency was manifested this evening. We also extend our deepest condolences to the honorable member on the passing of someone who has been so close to him over all these years. I also want to extend condolences to the family member of an outstanding Grenadian son of the soil, Brother Campbell. You noticed tonight that Dr. Mitchell began to get very emotional the minute he mentioned his experience witnessing the death of someone so close to him last night. So we empathize. We empathize with him, and we empathize with the entire family for what they have been through, what they are still going through as a result. And I notice we have someone extremely close to Brother Campbell here tonight. The fact that you are here is truly a representation of his service to Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And I believe tonight that Dr. Mitchell's reaction here tonight is a testimony of how he feels about the journey himself, Brother Campbell, Brother Bowen, and so many who struggled with him over the years in this journey of building Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So tonight, I want to say to the MP for St. George Northwest, we are with you in your pain. We are with you in these very trying times because we understand what it is to lose someone so close to you. someone who means so much. And to the family, those who loved him so dearly, may God continue to console your hearts. Brothers and sisters, tonight was what I call the inaugural sitting of the People's Parliament. And this sitting tonight was to facilitate the MP for St. George Northwest and the people of St. George Northwest an opportunity to hear their parliamentary representative present. But I want to say just 2 or 3 things as I close. There's been so much said about what happened at the last sitting of Parliament. I just want to say 2 things that may not have been abundantly clear to everyone. Number 1, contrary to what has been said by government ministers, that we received a schedule that we did not follow, I wish to clear the air. Brothers and sisters, we received a schedule prepared by the government team, approved by the Parliament, and that schedule had the last 4 speakers as opposition, which was our dear sister from St. Mark's, followed by government, followed by opposition, followed by government. Because there were 15 people accounted for on that list, it means that the only person, according to the schedule we received from the government, that could have spoken after Sister Clarice was the honorable member for St. David's. Because there were 15 people accounted for on that schedule, there was only one person that could have wrapped up the debate, which was the honorable member for St. Patrick East. So tonight I say to you, we did what we had to do. The speaker, when he came to us as an opposition, he gave us the assurance that because the honorable member for St. Patrick East started the closing of the budget, that he was going to continue. So 2 things you must note. Dr. Mitchell was not present at the point because according to the government schedule, he was not the person listed to speak. And secondly, as I said, we were given the assurance that the person who began the wrap-up of the budget was going to continue to close that wrap-up of the budget. And so tonight, I say to you, our role and our responsibility is to reflect your voices, the voices of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And that is why I am trusting tonight that the Speaker of this Parliament is going to continue to provide an opportunity for this team to hold our government accountable as we are supposed to do as a responsible opposition. So tonight, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to say to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, to say to those who are in the chamber tonight, that we will continue to fight for you until our very last breath. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. At this time, and based on the circumstances that we are faced with, I want to assure everyone that everything is okay, that our member for the constituency of St. George Northwest is okay, and that we will take our adjournment at this time. We thank you very much for being the disciplined crowd that you was, and we will definitely let you know where the next venue for the People's Parliament will be. This Parliament is adjourned.